joining us now. The attack follows a massive military buildup in the Middle East and with the largest fleet of U.S. warships and aircraft in decades. Let's bring in former Navy SEAL Jack Carr. Jack, thanks a lot for being here. First, your overall assessment of what you've seen and heard today about this attack.
Well, when I woke up this morning, my phone was lighting up with text messages. I wasn't surprised. The administration's maximum pressure campaign was not successful because there were options for Iran, but there were really no options that allowed them to save face. There wasn't that kind of an off-ramp, with President Trump wanting an agreement that prevents them from developing nuclear weapons, an end to proxy force terrorist support, and limit their ballistic missile capability. Remember that the organizing principle of this regime since 1979 has been death to America, death to Israel. That has allowed the regime to have the populace support them because they had an enemy, an outside enemy to rally against, and really there was no off-ramp. So I was not surprised to wake up this morning and see that we are now in a direct confrontation with Iran. Now, bowing to those concessions for the Iranian regime really amounted to complete surrender, which they were never going to do. And for me, it feels like I've seen some of this before, and I think a lot of us who are in Iraq and Afghanistan serving there have some of those concerns about regime change. But my hope is, and hope of course is never a course of action, but that we have learned from the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan and are applying them to this current problem set, meaning ahead of time, hopefully we have identified a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary leader in Iran to step up into a power vacuum if the regime is in fact taken off the board. So I think that was a vital lesson that needs to be learned. Otherwise, the unintended consequences of something like this, we have no idea what steps into that power vacuum. We saw that in Libya, we saw that in Egypt.
Yeah, to that point, Jack, I think that that's a really good question. And for the skeptics of this move, the critics and the folks who are just kind of in the middle saying, what comes next? Do you believe that to be able to pull this trigger, to be able to do this, that there has to be another step? There has to be some level of planning that involves the Israelis' intelligence, our intelligence, what's happening on the ground, and how the vacuum will be filled if and when the regime, in fact, does fall.
I would think so, and I would think that with the people that we have in place throughout the senior level military leadership in the administration, that they weren't going to do something like this unless Iran really was close to developing this nuclear weapon. Now, we've heard that for the past essentially 2 decades, then there's been an off-ramp. We've heard it again, another off-ramp. So I would think in this case, there was an opportunity to make sure going forward that Iran does not develop this capability that directly could impact America and, of course, allies around the world. So I think that must have been on the table. And then in this case, of course, we have there's other things at play here. Strait of Hormuz. So the special operations side of the house, I would think, is moving into there to secure that area, hitting these nuclear facilities. Maybe from the inside this time. Perhaps we learned from the strikes last summer that air power alone was not enough to take these things off the board and to completely destroy them. Maybe it was only enough to deter, to dismantle them for a little while. So putting boots on the ground, destroying them from the inside, that's a possibility. And of course, hitting high-value individuals, those high-value targets, and those command and control centers, those are probably what's on the board here. But when we take it a step further and we think about an Iranian response, of course, we're seeing some of those ballistic missiles now headed towards Israel and other allies in the region. But we can take this back to 1983 and think of the proxy force from Iran that hit our peacekeepers who were Marines in Beirut, that headquarters and barracks building in October of 1983, and what the administration's response to that taught the enemy. And that taught them, there was a lot of tough talk out of Washington at the time, and then in early 1984, we left the region. But what it taught the enemy was that terrorism works. So, so that is certainly in play going forward here. And then that back and forth, if we do not completely take this regime out, if new leadership doesn't come in that is in the U.S. camp, not the Russia and China camp, but if we have new a leadership vacuum that that is filled by people who use these proxy forces. Remember, Hezbollah now is a worldwide type of an organization, and we can go back not to Iran but to Libya and remember the strikes against Libya in response to killing 2 U.S. servicemen in Berlin in 1986. There were U.S. strikes targeting Gaddafi. Didn't take him out, and what did that lead to? It led to Pan Am 103 in December of 1988.
Yeah, and you know, the president stitched together a lot of that history in the 8-minute address that he gave announcing these strikes this morning. Jack Carr, thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.